The pillow that changed everything, when Willow's desperation reached its breaking point. The halls of General Hospital have witnessed countless dramas over the decades, but few moments could match the chilling intensity of what unfolded in Drew Kane's hospital room. What began as a calculated act of revenge has spiraled into something far darker. And now, an innocent child stands at the center of a nightmare no one saw coming. A husband left for dead. Drew Kane lies motionless in his hospital bed, a prisoner in his own body. The once powerful congressman who manipulated lives and wielded political influence like a weapon now exists in a terrifying state of locked-in syndrome. He can hear everything. He can see everything. But he cannot speak, cannot move, cannot defend himself. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a stroke brought on by stress or genetics. Drew is living through a slow, torturous hell because his wife Willow Kane poisoned him. The substance Willow injected into Drew's system was carefully chosen. It wasn't meant to kill him quickly. That would have been too merciful, too clean. No, Willow wanted Drew to suffer. After months of manipulation, isolation, and control, after he cost her custody of her children, Willow wanted Drew to experience powerlessness in its most absolute form. And for a time, her plan worked perfectly. The woman who lost everything. To understand how Willow Tate, once the gentle, compassionate nurse, beloved by her patients, transformed into someone capable of such calculated cruelty, requires looking at the journey that brought her here. Willow had already lost so much. The custody battle that tore Wiley and Amelia from her arms had broken something fundamental inside her. Michael Corinthos, her ex-husband, had successfully convinced the courts that Drew's influence made her an unfit mother. The children she had fought for, the family she had built, all of it was ripped away because of Drew. Drew who promised to help her. Drew who swore he would get her children back. Drew who isolated her from everyone who truly cared about her while presenting himself as her only ally. The shooting had been an act of desperation, 2 bullets in Drew's back fired by a woman who saw no other way out. When she was found not guilty, many believed justice had been served. But Willow wasn't satisfied. Drew had survived. He was still breathing, still existing in the world that had become her prison. So she decided to finish what she started, just not with a gun this time. Living death. The poison worked exactly as Willow intended. Drew suffered what appeared to be a massive stroke, leaving him with locked-in syndrome, a condition so horrific it seems designed by nightmares. He is completely conscious, fully aware of everything happening around him, but utterly unable to communicate or move anything except perhaps his eyes. For Willow, this was phase 1. Drew needed to understand what powerlessness truly felt like. He needed to lie there helpless while she controlled every aspect of his care, his comfort, his very survival. She brought him home from the hospital, arranged for a hospital bed, secured all the medical equipment necessary to keep him alive. To the outside world, Willow appeared to be the devoted wife, sacrificing her own well-being to care for her incapacitated husband. Tracy Quartermain might call it karma, but the truth was far more sinister. Because keeping Drew alive wasn't an act of mercy or devotion. It was torture. Willow could do anything to Drew now. She could adjust his medication, withhold his pain relief, position him uncomfortably for hours. She could whisper in his ear all the things she truly thought of him, watch the recognition and horror in his eyes, and know he couldn't respond. Couldn't defend himself, couldn't call for help. But it still wasn't enough. As long as Drew was breathing, he remained a threat, a potential obstacle to reclaiming her children. Willow had come too far, sacrificed too much of herself to stop now. Drew had to die. The point of no return. The decision crystallized in Willow's mind with cold clarity. She had been playing dirty maneuvering pieces on a chessboard where the stakes were her children's futures. But she needed Drew completely out of the picture, not incapacitated, not struggling, but gone. The hospital room seemed like the perfect place. Drew was already in such a fragile state. If something were to happen, if he were to stop breathing, it could easily be attributed to complications from his condition. Medical crises happen all the time in locked-in syndrome patients. No one would question it too closely. Willow's hands trembled slightly as she reached for the pillow. This was different from the poisoning, different from the shooting. This required her to be present to watch the life drain from Drew's eyes. To physically press down and hold firm while his body fought for oxygen it couldn't obtain. Drew's eyes, those eyes that could still move, still communicate the consciousness trapped inside, locked onto hers. She could see the recognition there, the understanding of what was about to happen. And perhaps beneath the fear, she saw something else, the acknowledgement that he had created this monster, that his manipulation and control had pushed her past every boundary she once held sacred. Willow positioned the pillow carefully. Her breath came shallow and quick. This was it. The final act. After this, she would be free to rebuild her life, to fight for her children without Drew's shadow looming over everything. She pressed down. The witness. "Mommy!" The small voice cut through the room like a gunshot. Willow froze, the pillow still pressed against Drew's face. She turned slowly, her heart hammering against her ribs with a force that threatened to crack them open. Wiley stood in the doorway, his small frame silhouetted against the light from the hallway. His eyes, so innocent, so trusting, were fixed on her hands, on the pillow on Drew's motionless form beneath it. Time seemed to suspend itself. Everything Willow had calculated, every careful plan, every rationalization for her actions, all of it evaporated in the face of her son's confused, frightened expression. "Mommy, what are you doing?" The question was simple, asked in the straightforward way children have when they don't yet understand that some questions carry the weight of entire worlds. But Wiley's eyes held something more than confusion. There was a flicker of understanding there, the beginning of awareness that what he was witnessing wasn't right, wasn't the kind of thing his mother should be doing. Willow released the pillow as if it had burned her. Drew's chest heaved beneath her as his body desperately pulled in air. She stepped back from the bed, her hands shaking uncontrollably, now her mind racing to find words that could somehow explain the unexplainable. "Wiley, sweetie, her voice cracked. What could she possibly say? How do you explain attempted murder to a child? How do you justify trying to kill someone, even someone as terrible as Drew, when your son is standing right there, watching you become the monster you'd once only read about in cautionary tales? The moment everything changes. Wiley didn't run. He didn't scream. He simply stood there, his young mind trying to process what his eyes had seen. This was his mother, the person who was supposed to protect him, comfort him, keep him safe from the scary things in the world. But right now, in this moment, she was the scary thing. "Were you hurting, Drew?" Wiley asked, his voice small and uncertain. The question hit Willow harder than any physical blow could have. Because yes, she had been hurting Drew. She had poisoned him, reduced him to this helpless state, and now she had been trying to finish him off permanently. And her son, her beautiful, innocent son, who she'd fought so hard to be with, had witnessed it all. What would this do to him? How do you protect a child from the trauma of watching his mother commit murder? How do you undo the damage of this single, terrible moment? Behind her, Drew's eyes were moving frantically, locked onto Wiley. If he could speak, what would he say? Would he beg the child to call for help? Would he try to turn Wiley against her? But Drew couldn't speak. He could only watch as Willow's carefully constructed plan crumbled into dust. The impossible choice. Willow found herself at a crossroads that allowed for no good options. She could try to explain to Wiley to make him understand why Drew was bad, why he had to be removed from their lives. But how do you make a child understand adult complications of manipulation, custody battles, and justified revenge? She could comfort him, pull him into her arms, and try to erase what he'd seen. But children, don't forget moments like this. The image of his mother holding a pillow over someone's face would live in Wiley's mind, shaping his understanding of who she was, what she was capable of. Or she could send him away, tell him he didn't see what he thought he saw, that everything was fine and he should go back to his room. But the fear in his eyes told her that lie wouldn't work. Wiley knew what he'd seen. "Mommy, I'm scared," Wiley whispered. Those 3 words shattered whatever remained of Willow's resolve. Her son was afraid of her. The child she'd moved heaven and earth to protect was now frightened by her actions. In fighting so desperately to get her children back, had she become exactly the kind of person they should be protected from? The aftermath. The room fell silent except for Drew's labored breathing and the soft sounds of medical equipment monitoring his vital signs. Willow stood frozen between the bed and her son, caught in a moment that would define the rest of their lives. Every choice she made in the next few seconds would have irreversible consequences. If she tried to silence Wiley, if she even considered it, she would cross a line so dark there would be no coming back. But if she let him leave, if she allowed him to tell someone what he'd seen, she would lose everything, her freedom, her children, her future. The woman who had started this day, determined to rid herself of Drew Kane forever, now faced a far more terrifying question. What kind of person had she become? And more importantly, what would she do next? Drew's eyes continued their frantic movement, the only communication he could manage. Wiley remained in the doorway, torn between running away and running to his mother. And Willow stood at the center of it all, the architect of her own nightmare, faced with the ultimate consequence of her actions. The pillow lay discarded on the bed, a silent witness to the attempted murder and the innocence shattered in its wake. What happens now? The question hovering in the air of that hospital room is one that will determine the trajectory of multiple lives. Will Wiley keep silent? Traumatized by what he's witnessed, but too frightened or confused to tell anyone, will Willow attempt to explain away what happened, to manipulate the situation one more time? Or has this moment, this horrible, irreversible moment, finally awakened something in Willow that recognizes how far she's fallen? Port Charles has seen its share of darkness, but few stories have captured the devastating collision of desperation, revenge, and innocence quite like this. A mother fighting for her children became a murderer, and her son watched it happen. A man who manipulated and controlled now lies helpless, saved only by the unexpected arrival of a child. As Drew continues to exist in his locked-in nightmares, Willow grapples with the horror in her son's eyes. And as Wiley tries to process what his young mind witnessed, one thing becomes clear. The consequences of revenge rarely unfold as planned. And the cost of justice sought through violence is often paid by those we're trying to protect. The pillow incident may have ended without Drew's death. But something else died in that room. Willow's last connection to the person she used to be, and Wiley's unshakable trust in his mother. What comes next will determine whether any of them can find redemption, or if they're all already too far gone.